Okay, for Unit 2, that's cellular respiration and photosynthesis. Pause the video, check out these questions. Okay, so cellular respiration has 3 steps. First one is glycolysis, and you want to know that all organisms, bacteria, plants, animals, everything does glycolysis. It doesn't require oxygen, and it occurs outside the mitochondria in the cytoplasm. And I mean, look at the word, it's breaking sugar. Okay, the second step is the Krebs cycle. It happens in the mitochondria. It happens with oxygen, makes 2 ATP. And remember, that's the purpose of the Krebs cycle is really to make those electron carriers NAD, NADH, and FADH. Okay, the electron transport chain, that happens on the membrane of the cristae, so like right here. And it pumps the hydrogen into that little space. The hydrogens go down through ATP synthase, or Big Mama. ATP synthase turns, and that makes 32 ATP. Okay, remember these two are substrate level phosphorylation because you're breaking a substrate. The last one is oxidative phosphorylation because you're using oxygen. Remember, oxygen is the final electron acceptor to make ATP. So if you look at this picture, the electrons originally come from glucose, and the electrons end at oxygen, but you make ATP. You make a bunch of ATP. Okay, so here's just a picture of the electron transport chain up close. You can see the electrons come from NADH, which were made in the glycolysis and Krebs cycle. The electrons go through the electron transport chain, pumping up hydrogen, so they're pumping them out of the cristae into that inner membrane space. The hydrogens go down through ATP synthase. ATP synthase turns, and that process is called chemiosmosis, and it makes ATP. Remember, there should be an oxygen over here somewhere. Right here. That's accepting the electrons, making water. Okay, photosynthesis. There's 2 processes. There's the light reaction, photo, and there's the Calvin cycle, which is making sugar. Light reaction happens in the thylakoids. Calvin cycle happens in the stroma. Remember, right here, big thing is that the electrons come from water. The electrons come right here from water, and water is split, and oxygen is released. So the electrons come from the water, and they go through, and here, this is the electron transport chain. It even says it. Electron transport chain, and it's going to make NADPH. So the electron transport chain of photosynthesis is opposite of the mitochondria. Remember, the electron comes from water, and it binds to NADP plus, making NADPH. Well, if you go back to the mitochondria, right here, it was opposite. It came from NADPH, and it made water. Okay, so the NADPH and the ATP are used in the Calvin cycle to make sugar. Remember, it uses that ribisco, and it uses G3Ps. Okay, so let's talk a second about catabolism and anabolism. Okay, so catabolism will be breaking a molecule. So that would be cellular respiration. So cellular respiration is a catabolic reaction because you break a molecule. Photosynthesis is an anabolic reaction because you're building glucose. So catabolism means to break down a molecule, such as cellular respiration, and anabolism is to build up a molecule, such as photosynthesis. Okay, and here's the electron transport chain here. It's just showing it in the thylakoid instead, and how the NADPH and ATP are used to make, they're made here in the light reaction, but then they'll be used in a second in the Calvin cycle. Okay, so this picture is just showing you how energy is transferred through the trophic levels. So remember, primary producer, primary consumer, secondary consumer, and as the animals are eaten, energy decreases up the trophic level. Lots of energy is lost in the form of heat. You can see the red arrows. So this is just the flow of energy. And remember the chemical cycle, the blue, that would be like nitrogen, phosphorus, water. Those things are cycled, so they're not lost, while energy is lost up the trophic levels. And remember tertiaries at the top, that'd be like a hawk or something like that. Okay, so remember that leaves have stomata on the openings or the openings are called stomata on the bottoms of the leaves. And the purpose of this stomata is to let CO2 in and oxygen out. So remember that oxygen comes from the light reaction. CO2 is used for the Calvin cycle. Remember, the loss of water is called transpiration. And think about it, a plant would need to do transpiration less, or never needs to do transpiration. A plant would do transpiration less in a humid environment. So the water is going to leave the leaves more when it's windy or really hot and dry. So it's just like evaporation from leaves. It's a bad thing for plants. They want to store their water because they need their water for the light reaction. But sometimes it escapes through the stomata. Since we're here, remember that can plants, that's like cactus, they close their stomata during the day in order to conserve water. That's what the next thing is, I think. Yep, so this is just the difference in C3, C4, or can plants. So pause the video for a second and look at this. Remember, C3 is normal photosynthesis, and that happens in the mesophyll cells. So this is actually wrong. This should say mesophyll cells. Dang, picture's wrong. C4 happens in the bundle sheath cells, and can plants happen in the mesophyll cells. So can plants, they open their stomata only at night. So they're used to really, really hot environments. C4, they do photosynthesis deeper in the leaf in the bundle sheath cells so that they can keep their water. And then C3, that's normal photosynthesis, what we've been talking about. And it happens in the mesophyll cells. Oh, right here it says mesophyll cells fix CO2. Oh, so, I'm sorry. Okay, let's look at this picture. This says bundle sheath cells lacking chloroplast. So this diagram isn't wrong. I just saw bundle sheath and assumed it was wrong. It happens in, so C3 is mesophyll, CAM is mesophyll, C4 is in bundle sheath. Okay, remember an example of CAM is cactus. You can remember that. Example of C4 is corn. And then an example of C3 is, most trees that live around here in Alabama. So. Okay, the only thing I didn't talk about on this one would be on cellular respiration. We didn't talk about anaerobic respiration. Remember, anaerobic respiration would have to happen right out here. And it takes the glucose, breaks it into pyruvic acid, just like regular. But then the pyruvic acid is broken again, and as a byproduct, it either makes ethyl alcohol or lactic acid. And remember, if it makes ethyl alcohol, it also releases CO2. That's what makes bread rise. Lactic acid, that's what happens in our muscle cells when we run out of oxygen, when we run out of the stored oxygen. So anaerobic respiration only makes 2 ATP total, the 2 from glycolysis. So aerobic respiration, that would require oxygen. All 3 steps is aerobic respiration, and you get way more energy that way. Okay, so that concludes Unit 2 for photosynthesis and cellular respiration.